Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. We are going to have a very different type of podcast today because I'm recording this Wednesday the 9th. And so this is not a recap pod. This is not my reaction because it hasn't happened yet. It's releasing on Monday morning. And part of this is because I'm on vacation. And so I'm not going to do this while I'm on vacation. So this post or this pod and the picks pod for week 12 will come the following week. I'm not going to do a top 10, not going to do power rankings because I'm not going to know when I do the picks, I'm not going to know what happened. But I did want to do something so that you guys have content to listen to. And, I still think I have a decent idea of how matchups might go, but I wanted to post or to talk about something anyway. And I'll tell what it is. We're going to talk about the absurdity of knocking Ohio State and really any college for not producing quarterbacks. And part of this is in conjunction with Justin Fields really starting to be a really good quarterback at the NFL level. That has been something, but it's also the reality that CJ Stroud, I think, is going to be a good player in the NFL. And what a lot of people do is they look at the helmet and they say, well, Ohio State quarterbacks stink. They're system quarterbacks. They don't go through their progressions. They don't do this. They don't do that. And I want to talk about that because I'll just be quite honest with you. It's just stupid. It's absurd. And so that's where I'm going to go. If you like the podcast, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Make sure you do all that. Share it with your friends. Here's what I have become just agonizingly frustrated with is this idea that certain schools don't produce certain positions well. And so it happens every year to the NFL draft, right? So when Dwayne Haskins, who sadly lost his life earlier this year, when he was drafted, a lot of people were like, well, he's from Ohio State. They don't produce good quarterbacks. And he slid in the draft. And everybody made comments to say, hey, he's not good. He's just an Ohio State guy. And by the way, Daniel Jones is better, which did not make a lot of sense to me. Now, granted, Daniel Jones, he's been okay. He hasn't been great. I don't know if there was a ton of justification aside from Dwayne Haskins, I think from a character perspective, struggled when he got to the league. But that's neither here nor there. In terms of a capability. I thought they were fairly even. But you heard a lot of junk about Dwayne, and you didn't hear anything but praise for Daniel, which just was mind-boggling to me. Justin Fields, same thing. It was 1A, 1B, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. And you get to the draft and you hear all these things about work ethic questions. And can he read defenses? And, Dan Orlovsky, who he loves Justin Fields. Like, he talks very highly of Justin Fields. But he's coming on ESPN and saying there are execs who are questioning whether he's the type of guy who'll be the first one in, last one out, and said he's the last one in and the first one out. In other words, they're saying he doesn't work hard. He doesn't want it. And then again, they cite, well, Ohio State doesn't train their quarterbacks to do X, Y, or Z, and they stink in the league. And it's happening again with CJ Stroud. And I want to talk about CJ a little later in this, but I want to start with this assertion that Ohio State quarterbacks don't pan out in the NFL. Let me just be clear. Nobody has a great track record with quarterbacks. Like, nobody does. Like, if you look at the long, illustrious list of who has the most NFL quarterbacks, at the most good NFL quarterbacks, like, it tops out at like a school having 3 or 4, and that's it. And even then, you're kind of stretching. So, like, Miami is heralded as a historic, quarterback school, right? And, they've had good quarterbacks. But, you go down the list and it's not very long in terms of who did well in the league, right? So just to give you an example, you have Jim Kelly, who obviously was good, started in 4 Super Bowls, is a Hall of Famer. That's great. Bernie Kosar, obviously a good quarterback. He's a Super Bowl champion, a two-time Pro Bowler. Good. Vinny Testaverde. I guess he's good, right? Like, certainly longevity, right? 2-time Pro Bowler. Okay, great. He was okay, like, kind of a journeyman quarterback, but, like, successful, right? And then after that, like, who else has done well? That's 3, right? Maybe, that you don't really have anybody else. That was 3 quarterbacks. 3. One of them's a Hall of Famer. Okay, well let's go to another school that's known as a quarterback school. Let's go to Purdue. Purdue, great quarterback school, right? Purdue is a great quarterback school. Let's look at the starting quarterbacks. Who have they had as starting quarterbacks? It's known as a cradle of quarterbacks. Quarterback U, Curtis Painter. Meh. Kyle Orton. He had a couple of good years. Drew Brees, going to be a Hall of Famer, right? He'll be a Hall of Famer. Bob Greasy, Hall of Famer, right? Len Dawson, Super Bowl champ, right? So he was really good. Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, 3 they have 3 quarterbacks who started and won a Super Bowl. And then Jim Everett, who didn't have a great career, but, had a decent career for sure. He was an NFL passing touchdowns leader. That's four. That's four guys who had good to great careers. And then maybe a couple others who had decent careers, right? Like Mike Phipps. So that's five. Mark Herman bounced around the league a little bit, but, wasn't, didn't do a lot. So really there's four really good quarterbacks. You had Gary Danielson, who is certainly more well known as a broadcaster than as a quarterback. He started, but was never a Pro Bowler, never won a Super Bowl, right? So they've got guys, is my point. But that's maybe the best, right? Clemson, everybody talks about Clemson right now with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, and that's it. NC State, you got a couple, right? You have, all of a sudden I'm blanking the quarterback that's starting right now for Cleveland. Why can't I remember his name? Obviously, you had Phillip Rivers, but most of the schools that you talk about, you're talking about 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and that's it. Michigan. Everybody talks about Michigan. You have Harbaugh and you have Tom Brady, and that's really it. Chad Henne is a good backup, right? Brian Greasy was a backup for a while, but not a lot of guys. And so when people start bringing up the school argument, I get tired because it's yes, they really haven't had a quarterback that's hit. Ohio State hasn't had a quarterback that's hit. But out of all the schools, no school really has a track record of putting quarterbacks in the league. And right now, some of the best quarterbacks are from Texas Tech, Patrick Mahomes, Wyoming, Josh Allen, Oregon, Justin Herbert, Oklahoma's put out a few right now. But it's not consistent. It just isn't. So that's my first frustration. My second frustration is this idea that Ohio State's had all these quarterbacks that have been hyped to go to the league only to be busts. I want to know what you are talking about. Because in my lifetime, there has been 2 quarterbacks even considered in the first round. And they both went first round. Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields. That's it, right? Joe Germain was never going to be a first rounder because he just didn't have the arm strength. Bobby Hoying, maybe he could have made it if he progressed a little bit more. But aside from that, Craig Krenzel, no. Troy Smith, he flirted with the first round, but then he struggled in the national championship game, and he was always going to be a second rounder at best because of his height. He wasn't going to be a first-round pick. Todd Beckman? No. Terrell Pryor? No. Braxton Miller? No. Cardale Jones? People were saying he'd be a first-rounder after the 3-game run he had. No. He wasn't good enough, and he wasn't being talked about as that, except for maybe a brief moment in time. JT Barrett? Absolutely not. As much as I love JT Barrett, no, that's 30 years of quarterbacks I just went through, or 25 years of quarterbacks. None of them were close to being a first rounder. But people say, well, Ohio State quarterbacks are hyped and then they fail in the league. No, they're not. The first 2 were Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields, at least since Art Schlichter in the 70s. What are you talking about? And so it's well, Ohio State's had a lot of busts. Well, yeah, Ohio State hasn't had a lot of quarterbacks start. You want to know why? Because they haven't had good quarterbacks. They've been running teams. They've been defense-led teams. This is the first time in Ohio State history under Ryan Day that they have had anything close to an NFL-level passing attack. Which grinds my gears because then people say, well, Ohio State doesn't have an NFL level attack. It's too wide open. No, 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 no. Do you even watch Ohio State? Like, do you? I don't think you do because they run a lot of different formations that you see in Ohio State. In the NFL, they run a lot of different personnel groupings. They run a lot of two tight end sets and a lot of under center as well as shotgun. It's a much more sophisticated attack than you realize, which also means it's not a one-read system. Like, it's not the same as when Urban Meyer ran it. It's not a one-read system. It just boggles my mind. It's like watch the film. Goodness, watch the film. So it grinds my gears because Ohio State, since Dwayne Haskins, has had first round level quarterbacks and hasn't had one since the 70s. But people have this criticism to say, well, Ohio State doesn't produce quarterbacks, and all their quarterbacks become busts. Let me correct that. Art Schlichter was a bust because he had a gambling problem. Okay? And then Dwayne Haskins didn't get a chance to prove he wasn't a bust because he died. And Justin Fields is proving he's not a bust. Let me talk about that for a minute. Because out of the 5 quarterbacks that got drafted in the first round, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields, you want to know who the best is right now? Best QBR? Justin Fields. You know who has the worst supporting cast out of all those quarterbacks in the league right now? Justin Fields. You know who was drafted to maybe the worst situation in the NFL out of all 5 of those quarterbacks? Justin Fields. I mean, just this past week, he's playing the Dolphins, 35-32. Throws a pinpoint accurate pass to Equimenius St. Brown on 4th and 10, and the ball hits him in the hands, which is apparently a bad place for him to catch the ball because it bounced off his hands and they lost the game. Is that Justin Fields' fault? Like, no. But let's not forget he threw for 3 touchdowns, ran for another touchdown, broke the NFL record for most rushing yards in a regular season game. Let's talk about he's the only quarterback to put up over 30 points against the Cowboys this year. Oh, and by the way, he also beat Mac Jones. And we're really quick to criticize Justin Fields, but other quarterbacks are defended. So I was interacting with a fan on Twitter. And I said, Justin Fields is the best quarterback right now. And he said, well, what about Mac Jones? He's better. Yeah, sure, he's better. Except he's about to get benched for Bailey Zappi. And people are like, well, but that's because of injury. Look at the headlines. They are considering benching him again post-injury. All right, Zach Wilson has struggled, but we don't talk about it. Trevor Lawrence has struggled, but we don't talk about it. Justin Fields struggles. Oh, he's a bust. He's bust. He's from Ohio State. He stinks. They don't train their quarterbacks well. I'm tired of the narrative. I'm tired of it. And Justin Fields has the worst supporting cast in the league, at least on offense. And yet he is making them better. He is making up for their failures. And he's winning games that he shouldn't. Which gets me to CJ Stroud. So obviously this is after the week 11, but in week 10, Ohio State played Northwestern. Before the game, I said, people are going to criticize CJ Stroud for struggling in a vortex, which the Weather Service said hurricane force winds will be like, I think 80 mile an hour winds was like the peak. Obviously not the whole game, but it was really bad. And somebody had the audacity to say CJ Stroud was really going to win the Heisman on bubble screens and on checkdowns. And I just wanted to just scream. Because the reality is, if you watch the film, that's not what he's doing. Go watch Penn State. You want to look at what didn't work? Bubble screens. But Penn State's got the best secondary in the country, or a top 3 secondary in the country. You know what he did? He threw pinpoint passes, over-the-shoulder catches, altered routes, looked coverage off. Go tell me how he's a one-read quarterback that only throws bubble screens. Like, stop it. Just stop it. He only completed 10 passes out of 26 against Northwestern. He's terrible. He was not the problem. My goodness. And NFL draft analysts, they criticize correctly, right? Like they pick apart his game and they say, hey, when he gets out of structure, he's not as good. Agree. He's not a perfect prospect, right? Sometimes when he doesn't get in a rhythm, he misses things. Absolutely. But when he's in rhythm, he's Peyton Manning-esque. Now, I'm not saying he should be treated like what I'm saying is he has tools and a mindset similar to that. So to give this garbage of, well, he's a one-read guy. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. He is a really, really good passer. And you know what really good passers can't do? Throw in wind. Particularly the gusts so powerful that they couldn't actually hear the call in the huddle. There's a lot of things I'm not excusing Ohio State for in that game. CJ Stroud's stat line is one of the few things I'm going to excuse. Because if it's rain, you can throw through it. If it's snow, you can throw through it. If it's wind, that's like the most difficult thing to compensate for is wind. Because the ball gets carried. And so this is the thing. I really don't care about Ohio State's reputation with quarterbacks. I really don't. Because ultimately, like, they haven't had a good track record with quarterbacks. But I'm tired of this narrative that Justin Fields can't be a good quarterback because he went to Ohio State, and that CJ Stroud can't be a good quarterback because he went to Ohio State, based on faulty logic. If you want to criticize Ohio State for not having quarterbacks up until 2018, by all means do that. That wasn't their focus. They focused on strong defense, strong running game, and a good enough passing game to open up the run. That's not true under Ryan Day. So let's stop the narrative. Justin Fields right now looks really good. And I think CJ Stroud's going to be a baller in the NFL. And if he's anything worse than the second quarterback taken, the NFL will be making the same mistake they made with Justin Fields. Like, is there any doubt Justin Fields should have been a top 2 pick at this point? Like, are we really still debating that Justin should have been picked behind Zach Wilson, who was good, not great in college? Are we really debating whether Justin Fields should have been picked behind Trey Lance, who was about as much of a developmental prospect as I've ever seen, as picked as high as he is? Like, are we kidding? I mean, my goodness, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, are we really debating whether CJ Stroud and Will Levis are on the same playing field? Like, Will Levis was held to under, I think, 90 yards in a game without wind against Tennessee, who has an awful pass defense. Like, are we really doing that? I'm done. I'm done ranting. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe. Thanks for letting me vent. Or not vent, rant. There are criticisms that are valid about these guys. And there's criticisms about Ohio State. And I'm all for that. I don't like this narrative that affects young men's lives. It's like, if you're gonna knock CJ for it, you better knock Will Levis for it. You better knock Bryce Young for struggling in certain capacities. And too often, I don't see that. I see a lot of haters for CJ. I see a lot of haters for Justin Fields. Stop using the logic you're using because it's not good. All right? That's it. I'll be back on Thursday for the picks. Hopefully, they are not as as off as some of my other picks have been this year. But take care. God bless.